Hi, this is Carol Beauchamp. Welcome to my presentation on the Freedmen's Bureau records. The years following the Civil War were a great time of turmoil in the South. Everything was topsy-turvy. The existing economy was destroyed, as were the cities and towns. 4 million newly liberated slaves and many whites had nowhere to go and were on the verge of starvation. Therefore, the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, better known as the Freedmen's Bureau, was established in 1865 by the War Department. Basically, it was a military operation. Their purpose was to relieve suffering to anyone in need, including whites and Indians, and to help support the newly freed slaves. If you were destitute, and a lot of people were after the Civil War, the Freedmen's Bureau was there to give assistance, no matter what your race was. The Freedmen's Bureau did this by helping those in need with getting their basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. They helped them get educated, find work, legalize their marriages, and assisted in locating their lost family members. Remember that during slavery times, families were often separated because a slave could be sold by his master at any time. This often happened when the owners of the plantation died. Slaves were often divvied up amongst the surviving heirs or when a master or his widow fell on hard times and needed money. The Freedmen's Bureau also helped them with legal matters, like overseeing labor contracts and handling disputes. They provided legal representation when needed, investigated racial conflicts, and settled freedmen on abandoned or confiscated land. All of this help was crucial to the freedmen's success because most slaves never learned to read. In most slave states, it was illegal to teach a slave to read and write. These laws came into play in the early 1830s after the slave revolt led by Nat Turner. Owners feared that black literacy would be a threat to the slave system. The Freedmen's Bureau left a body of records for a period of 7 years beginning in 1865 and ending in 1872. It is the most extensive record collection for African Americans post-Civil War. Documents associated with the Freedmen's Bureau often provide full names, residences, and often the names of former masters and plantations. It was through the local field offices that government workers provided direct assistance to and had direct contact with the freed people. They sprang up all over the South, but they weren't in every county. They operated on an as-needed basis, so some offices were there only for a short time. Thousands of records are available for research because of the business conducted by this agency. Each state will contain different records because each state had different needs. The Freedmen's Bureau operated their field offices mostly in the South. On the screen is a list of the states that had them. A good place to begin looking would be to locate the field office closest to the home of your ancestors. There is a database called Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau that shows you all of the field office locations within each state. I have included the website link on the screen. There was a field office located in Richmond, Texas. Some of the records I show throughout this presentation will be from that field office. On the screen is a list of some of the different types of records you could find when searching the Freedmen's Bureau collection. In the next few slides, I will be showing you some examples for part of the list to give you an idea of what information you can obtain. As mentioned earlier, one of the functions of the Freedmen's Bureau was to provide employment for the newly freed slaves. They helped do this by negotiating labor contracts for the freedmen, since most slaves were illiterate. The concept of paying for work that was once done for free was a hard one for the plantation owner to come to terms with. The example on the screen lists the plantation owner or planter, which in this case was N.D. Randon. Next to his name are a list of freedmen under his employment. The remarks section has the terms of the contract, which are that 1/3 of all the corn and cotton raised upon the plantation will go to the freedmen. It also stipulates that good food, quarters, and medical attention will be provided. Receiving a share of the crop is usually how the freedmen were paid rather than receiving money for their services. It was the end of the Civil War, where fortunes were lost and money was scarce. The labor contracts will look differently in every field office as well as other documents because there were no standard forms used across the board. There were a lot of complaints. Things did not run smoothly. I'm sure emotions ran high as everyone adjusted to their new circumstances. In the Bureau records, you will see complaints about the freedmen not getting paid what's owed to them. I have also seen complaints from the plantation owners in the form of letters that the freedmen weren't doing their job. Examining these records is a fascinating look into the very confusing times after the Civil War. In this example, the Freedmen's Bureau is stepping in on the behalf of the freedmen and retaining the crop from the Walker plantation to be divided up. Here is another example where the Freedmen's Bureau is stepping in to help resolve conflict over debts owed. This example and the one before it was taken from the field office located in Richmond, Texas. Marriage records can be found in the Freedmen's Bureau, but they are not complete. The amount of information that can be gleaned from these records varies from state to state. However, not all state field offices included marriage records. The states of Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas do not have marriage records through the Bureau because they already had their own systems in place. It was important to the freedmen to have their marriages recognized officially, but it wasn't a requirement on the Bureau's part. Before the end of the Civil War, slave marriages had been regulated by their masters. These previous slave marriages could now be legally recorded and recognized by the law. The example on the screen is from Little Rock, Pulaski County, Arkansas. The entries from this collection offer a lot of valuable information about the couples. This is usually not the case for all marriage records. They are all different and some are very simple and only give the names and a date. Within the field office records, you will find numerous letters reflecting the concerns and day-to-day activities of the Freedmen's Bureau. Most of the correspondence will be from the side of the Bureau, so you won't get to see the whole picture. The letters can be very interesting, though. The example on the screen involves the care of a child. Children were the most vulnerable during this time of transition. This is especially true for children without any parents. They were always in danger of being held against their will by their previous owners and forced to work for free. One of the jobs of the Freedmen's Bureau was to look out for their welfare and assign them to people who could take care of them. Some children were even kidnapped and abused during this time. Military documents can be found within the Freedmen's Bureau records as well. Records include information on discharge, enlistment or bounty payments, amongst others. This is an enlistment record for Ben Watts. Sometimes in the Freedmen's Bureau, you can find treasured census records for African Americans. Most of the ones I have seen were taken in 1865. This is a beautiful example of a census record from Montgomery County, Virginia. Unfortunately, it is not dated, but it does ask if they were a slave or free, so it was probably taken before the Civil War was over. This record is incredible. I've never seen anything like it for this time period for African Americans. It is very detailed and asks questions you normally don't see, such as whose plantation they work on. That information is hard to come by. The category under color is divided up into sections of black, mulatto, quadroon, and octoroon. Other questions concern their education, religion, address, physical condition, and whether or not they had property, as well as the usual questions about age and sex. This document is an absolute gold mine. It was exciting for me to see it. However, with that being said, it is very unusual to find a census record like this. Not all of the field offices took census records, and the ones that did didn't use the same form. You will find a variety of hospital records with the Bureau's records for some states. It just depends where they were located. There are all kinds of reports. This one is a monthly report of sick and wounded refugees and freedmen. It doesn't give any names, but will give you an idea of what diseases were afflicting the people in the area. This report also tells how many people died. In the Freedmen's Bureau, white people are referred to as refugees, while the freedmen are African Americans. During the Civil War, a lot of people were uprooted or driven from their land in the South. The term abandoned lands pertains to property of white landowners of plantations or farms that were abandoned during the war. It was possible for the secessionists to get their land back, but they would have to take an oath of allegiance to the country to do so. The Freedmen's Bureau used the abandoned lands after the Civil War. The names of former slave owners and landowners can be found in the Freedmen's Bureau records. This document gives the name of the former owner and tells us that he is deceased. It also gives the location of the land, how many acres, and what it is being used for. In this report, the land had 500 tents on it for 1,660 freed people and was called the Trent River Settlement. People were destitute and on the verge of starvation after the Civil War. The Freedmen's Bureau distributed rations to those in need. This document is a list of people that received rations at Orphans Farm in Craven County, North Carolina for the month of December. It lists the head of the household and gives the number of people in the family. Items they received were pork or bacon, cornmeal, beans, sugar, vinegar, soap, and salt. It tells how much they received of each item in the form of pounds, ounces, or other measurement. This is another very detailed document. It's very interesting to see what they were given and how much. In addition to food, clothing was also provided by the Freedmen's Bureau. Other records found in the Freedmen's Bureau collection that I don't have an example for include transportation and school records. The school records include various reports and may even have enrollment lists, which would include children and adults since the freedmen weren't educated while they were slaves. The transportation records consist of river and rail passes for freedmen trying to relocate to another town or state. Perhaps they had been sold away from their families during slavery and are trying to get back to their former homes or reunite with lost family members. The records of the Freedmen's Bureau are readily accessible online through FamilySearch.org. You can search directly from their webpage, discoverfreedmen.org, or through FamilySearch.org directly. In 2015, FamilySearch spearheaded the Freedmen's Bureau project along with the National Archives and other organizations to make the records more searchable by indexing all of the names within the records. More than 25,000 volunteers indexed 1.8 million names of men, women, and children. Ancestry.com also has a couple of databases concerning the Freedmen's Bureau as well. The Freedmen's Bureau records are an amazing set of records for the time period after the Civil War. Examining these records allows us to see the hardships and struggles endured by the freedmen and destitute. It was a great time of change and adjustment for everyone in the South. To get a clear picture of what Reconstruction was like in the area that your ancestors lived, find the nearest field office to their home and browse those records. You can do a search by just the name, but to know what was really going on, spend some time going through the records. Those records are very interesting. You will be surprised by what you can learn. Happy hunting and thank you for watching.